Most people think tank crews and infantry communicated by radio during World War II. They didn't. Radios connected tank to tank, not tank to foot soldier. So infantrymen did something desperate instead. They banged on the hull with rifle butts. And that noise became a death sentence, because every time a soldier stood up to knock, every time he ran alongside shouting directions, he painted a target on his back. Snipers heard it, machine gunners saw it, and men died trying to talk to the armour that was supposed to protect them. Then, in 1943, engineers bolted a small metal box to the outside of tanks. It looked simple, almost crude, but it solved one of the war's quietest problems. And the reason it worked reveals something most people never realise about how World War II was actually fought. Picture a Sherman tank rolling through a French village in July 1944. Bocage country, thick hedgerows, stone walls, narrow streets. The crew inside can't see anything below 10 feet. The vision slits show fragments. The periscope shows a tunnel. Engine noise drowns out everything else. It's hot, it's loud, it's claustrophobic. Now picture the infantry squad behind them. Crouched in a ditch. They just spotted a German machine gun team in a basement window, second building on the left. The tank crew has no idea. They're about to roll past it. The infantryman needs to tell them. Fast. So what does he do? He can't radio them. Infantry squads didn't carry radios compatible with tank systems. Handheld walkie-talkies were rare and short range. The few radios infantry had were for calling artillery or talking to command, not chatting with a tank. Tank radios operated on different frequencies, designed for armoured units to coordinate with each other, not ground troops. He can't shout. The engine is too loud. Even if the crew heard something, they wouldn't know what or where. So he does the only thing left. He runs up to the tank, exposed, and he slams his rifle butt against the steel hull. Hard, over and over, hoping someone inside notices, hoping the tank commander pops his hatch, hoping he can scream the direction before a sniper drops him. British captain Robert Boscawen, Coldstream Guards, described it like this in his war diary. Without the phone, infantry would have to run alongside shouting, which was suicidal. Suicidal. That's the word he used. This wasn't a minor inconvenience, it was a tactical breakdown. Tanks and infantry were supposed to work together. Now, tanks provided firepower and protection. Infantry provided eyes and security. But if they couldn't communicate, the whole system collapsed. Tanks blundered into ambushes. Infantry got caught in friendly fire. Coordination fell apart. The problem showed up everywhere. North Africa, Italy, Normandy, the Eastern Front. Different armies. Same issue. Tanks were blind. Infantry were vulnerable. And the gap between them was killing people. By mid-1943, after Allied forces fought through Tunisia and prepared for Italy, the British War Office compiled reports on tank-infantry cooperation. One document, dated August 1943, pointed directly at communications failures during Operation Torch. Infantry casualties from friendly tank fire, missed targets, wasted firepower. The report's recommendation was clear: install external telephone equipment. Yeah, but here's the part that surprises people. The solution wasn't some cutting-edge military technology. It was a phone, a simple, wired telephone, the kind you'd see in any field command post. Engineers took standard EE-8 field telephones, 3 by 5 by 9 inches, steel housing, 4.2 pounds without the handset, and bolted them to the outside of tanks. That's it. A box, a handset, a wire, and it changed everything. You might be thinking, why not just give infantry better radios, or install loudspeakers, or train tank commanders to watch for hand signals? Good questions. And engineers asked all of them. Here's why none of those worked. First, radios. Building a portable radio system that infantry could carry and that worked with tank frequencies wasn't impossible. But it was expensive, heavy, and fragile. Radios in 1943 needed vacuum tubes. They needed batteries that died fast. They needed operators who knew Morse code or radio procedure. They needed maintenance. Mass-producing thousands of these units, training every infantry squad to use them, and keeping them working in mud, rain, and freezing cold. That was a logistical nightmare armies couldn't afford, especially when they were already struggling to produce enough tanks, ammunition, and basic supplies. Second, loudspeakers. Some tanks tried this. Mount a speaker on the outside so the crew could talk to infantry. The problem? Everyone heard it, including the enemy. You'd basically be broadcasting your position and intentions to every German soldier within 100 yards. Tactically insane. Third, hand signals. Helpful in some situations, useless in most. Smoke, darkness, buildings, terrain. Anything that blocked line of sight made signals worthless. And in combat, when speed mattered, stopping to wave flags or flash lights got people killed. The phone was different. It was simple, cheap, reliable. You didn't need training beyond pick up the handset and talk. It worked in the dark. It worked in smoke. It worked when the infantryman was crouched behind cover and the tank was 10 feet away. No line of sight required. No batteries to die. No frequencies to tune. Just copper wire and a voice. The US version, the EE8 system, weighed 6.8 pounds with the handset. British used the number 10 set, about 5.5 pounds. Soviets used a variant of their internal TPU-3 intercom, around 7 pounds. All of them worked the same way. An infantryman grabbed the handset from a weatherproof box mounted on the tank's rear hull. He cranked a small generator or pressed a buzzer. Inside, the tank crew heard a ring or click through their intercom system. They flipped a switch. Now they were connected. "Fritz in the basement, second window." That's a quote from a Soviet tank commander's account, translated from an interview published in 2008. 6 words: specific, immediate, actionable. The tank crew understood instantly. No confusion, no wasted time. Compare that to banging on the hull. Even if the crew heard it, they didn't know what it meant. Enemy contact? Mechanical problem? Stop? Go? They'd have to open the hatch to find out, and opening the hatch in combat was dangerous. The phone eliminated that risk. Infantry stayed in cover. Tank crews stayed buttoned up. Communication happened anyway. But there was a trade-off. The phone wasn't armoured. It couldn't be. In extra armour meant extra weight, and tanks were already overloaded. The box was weatherproof, sure, but a direct hit from shrapnel or a rifle round would destroy it. Accounts from the field mention phones getting shot off or blown apart. When that happened, you were back to banging on the hull. But most of the time, it worked. And when it worked, it saved lives. By late 1943, American M4 Shermans started receiving phones as field modifications. Crews welded or bolted mounting brackets to the rear hull. By 1944, technical manuals like TM9-759 included installation instructions. British tanks, Churchills, Cromwells, Shermans in British service got the number 10 set around the same time. Soviets integrated external connections into their TPU intercom systems on T-34s and heavy IS-2 tanks. The Germans? They barely used them. A few Panthers and Tigers in late 1944 and early 1945 show external phone boxes in archival photos, but it never became standard. Why? Likely because by that point Germany was on the defensive. Their tanks weren't coordinating with advancing infantry as much. They were fighting from static positions or retreating. The tactical need wasn't as urgent, and they didn't have the production capacity to retrofit thousands of tanks with non-essential equipment. Allied forces did, and they realised something crucial. The phone wasn't just a communication tool, it was a force multiplier. Let's go back to that French village. Same scenario, same machine gun in the basement. But now the infantryman doesn't run. He doesn't bang on the hull. He crawls to the back of the Sherman, grabs the handset and speaks. Second building left, basement window, id MG 42. Inside, the crew hears him clearly. The gunner traverses the turret. The loader slams in a high explosive round. 3 seconds later, the building's front wall explodes. The machine gun goes silent. The infantry advance. No one dies trying to relay a message. That's the battlefield reality of the tank phone. It turned guesswork into precision. It turned chaos into coordination. Lieutenant Belton Y. Cooper of the 3rd Armoured Division wrote about this in his memoir, Death Traps. He described street fighting in Cologne, Germany in March 1945. Quote, "The infantry telephone mounted on the back of the tank proved invaluable during street fighting in Germany. Previously, infantrymen would bang on the hull with rifle butts to get our attention, which often drew sniper fire. The phone let them coordinate without exposing themselves. Street fighting, close quarters. Every corner a potential ambush. The phone gave infantry a lifeline. They could hide behind rubble, behind walls, behind the tank itself, and still direct fire exactly where it needed to go." Captain Boscawen's diary entry from Normandy in July 1944 echoes the same point. He called the phone a godsend during Bocage fighting. Dense hedgerows made visibility almost zero. Tanks couldn't see past the next row. Infantry could. And with the phone, they could guide tanks through ambush points, mark targets, call for covering fire, all without stepping into the open. The phone also reduced friendly fire, a huge problem in combined arms warfare. Tanks couldn't always distinguish friendly infantry from enemy troops, especially in poor visibility or at distance. Before the phone, if infantry came under fire and needed the tank to shoot, they'd try to signal or shout. By the time the tank crew understood, the situation had changed. Or worse, the tank fired blindly and hit the wrong people. With the phone, identification was instant. A voice, a name, a specific request. No ambiguity. This mattered more than most people realize. War isn't just about heroic charges and big battles. It's about tiny decisions made under pressure. Can I trust this information? Do I shoot now or wait? Is that movement friendly or enemy? The phone answered those questions. It removed doubt, and doubt kills. Now here's the part most people miss. The phone wasn't just a tool for survival, it was a tool for aggression. It let infantry use tanks more effectively, call in fire faster, exploit openings quicker. A tank is a weapon. But without good targeting information, it's just a loud, slow, expensive piece of steel. The phone turned it into a precision instrument. By 1944, roughly 15,000 American M4 Shermans had external phone installations. British and Soviet numbers are harder to pin down, but photographic evidence shows widespread adoption. Even late in the war, as Allied armies pushed into Germany, the phones stayed on. Because they worked. But here's the thing, most people today have never heard of them. They're not in movies, they're not in video games, they don't show up in popular history. You see tanks, you see infantry, you don't see the little metal box on the back that let them talk to each other. Why? Because it's not sexy, it's not dramatic, it's not a technological marvel. It's just a phone. But that's exactly why it matters. World War II wasn't won by wonder weapons or genius tactics alone. It was won by solving small, unglamorous problems, like, how do I tell the tank crew where to shoot without getting killed? The phone answered that question. And in doing so, it saved thousands of lives. Maybe more. We'll never know the exact number. But every time an infantryman grabbed that handset instead of running into the open, every time a tank crew heard a clear target description instead of guessing, the odds shifted. That small metal box wasn't just a communication device. It was a survival mechanism, a tactical edge. a quiet innovation that changed how armour and infantry fought together for the rest of the war. And most people have no idea it existed. So the next time you see a WW2 tank in a museum or a documentary, look at the back. You might see a small box, maybe a mounting bracket. That's the phone. The unglamorous, overlooked piece of equipment that turned banging on steel into a conversation. That turned exposure into cover. That let soldiers communicate without dying for it. It wasn't high-tech. It wasn't revolutionary. It was just practical. And in war, practical beats perfect every time. That little box deserves a second look. If you've got a WW2 object you think deserves the same treatment, drop it in the comments. And if you want to see how soldiers actually used this equipment in combat, check out the next video on tank infantry tactics in Normandy. It's linked right here.